I suppose there are two ways to ask this question, and I'm going to put them both out there. First is, how does one become a district governor? And the other version of the question is, how did you become a district governor?
Mr. Psi, you can go ahead and start that.
I was punished. No, just playing.
Hello, and welcome to episode 60 of the BandWagon podcast for the week of May 5th, 2025. On this edition of the program, news and notes from the band world, including news from beautiful downtown Burbank, a very sad follow-up to last week's trio section, a band which sounded like it was from a galaxy far, far away, and I have a conversation with a couple of governors. I'm your host, Rob Hammerton. Hello, dear listener. This episode will go this way and that, sometimes deadly serious, sometimes not, which may come as a relief after last week's decidedly frowny 35 minutes worth. This week, there's happy news, there's sad news, there's at least one sobering moment, which I will give you a heads up about as it approaches. And this week, we're back to the standard trio section interview format, and thank heaven for that, frankly. So, empty your spit valves, and away we go. Let's play the first strain. In this episode's first strain, news and notes from the band world. Dateline Burbank, California. Credit to the writing and reporting of David Laurel at the Burbank Leader newspaper. On Saturday, April 12th, the Burbank Community Band presented a concert celebrating its 85th anniversary. The master of ceremonies for the concert was retired NBC4 Los Angeles TV meteorologist Fritz Coleman, who at the start of the concert spoke of the concert as an opportunity to find musical respite from a world fractured by politics and social issues. Quote, "This is going to cleanse your soul." Band conductor Michael Stanley said later that the quip was not scripted. Quote, "That was something Fritz just ad-libbed from his heart. I knew what he meant because the vibrations in an auditorium when music is playing are positive ones. They tie people together emotionally. You're not just hearing the music, but feeling it. It's easier to stay in a positive space, a space of love, when you are with people who are all being uplifted in a way that binds you together." The band's 85th anniversary concert paid homage to the city of Burbank, with repertoire including music from classic films, Johnny's theme from The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, the Looney Tunes theme, and John Higgins' arrangement of Disney at the Movies. Dateline, Arlington, Texas. On Friday evening, April 25th, after conducting the final spring semester concert of the University of Texas at Arlington's Wind Symphony, Dr. Doug Stotter passed away after apparently having suffered a heart attack. At the time of recording, memorial or funeral arrangements had not yet been announced. Stotter was completing his 20th year as director of bands and coordinator of the wind and percussion division at Texas-Arlington. He conducted the Wind Symphony and taught undergraduate and graduate conducting and wind literature courses. He was active as a conductor, clinician, and adjudicator throughout the U.S., and most recently in China, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore. His textbook, Methods and Materials for Conducting, was published in 2006 by GIA Publications and is now in use in university conducting courses across the country. Stotter also was principal conductor and artistic director of the Dallas Civic Wind Ensemble and had previously held conducting and teaching appointments at schools including the University of Missouri at Rolla, Valdosta State University, and Indiana University. He had been set to assume the role of Southwest Division President of the College Band Directors National Association this fall. And that's news and notes from the band world for this week. If you have a news item you think should be included in this segment, send me a link via email to heybandwagon@yahoo.com. Now we'll take a quick break and meet you on the other side. Hope you'll stay with me. Okay, let's pick it up at the second strain. In this week's second strain, right out of the gate, I'd like to thank you for indulging me regarding last week's trio section. As I mentioned at the beginning of last week, episode 59 was driven mainly by one of the most shocking and sad and worrying news stories I've heard in a while, at least the stories that have dealt with the arts and schools and such. The wholesale elimination of the Jacksonville University Music Department, along with a number of other arts and humanities majors, was a blow to many students, faculty, and alumni of that university. But it was also a harbinger of what may be to come. Plenty of state governments have observed, for example, a piece of legislation passed into law by another state government and thought, that's a blueprint for something we've wanted to do too. Sometimes those legislative or policy efforts promote the general welfare, and some do not. Either way, copycat policies. In the particular case of Jacksonville University, if you don't think a whole lot of other schools who may feel threatened by current federal government policy initiatives were watching what Tim Cost and his administration have done to Jacksonville University's arts and humanities environment, well, be sure that we will now see more of that. JU phrased their future-focused initiative in a way that, to listeners who may not have been listening very carefully, may not have sounded as awful as it really is. The title alone is a work of gaslighting genius. And to add insult to injury, it was not only the content of the announcement back on the Ides of April that caused a lot of trauma and damage, but also the timing of it. Just a handful of weeks before the end of the spring college semester, a whole lot of programs and events were thrown into turmoil. Some of them were cast in a new and terrible light. The Jacksonville State University Orchestra's last concert of the semester suddenly became its last concert ever. That ensemble kept calm and carried on, presenting a concert last Thursday evening which included the student winners of JU's annual concerto competition, and, ironically, closed with a movement from Dvorak's New World Symphony. Toward the end of that concert, the orchestra's conductor, Dr. Marguerite Richardson, made an announcement before that last Dvorak selection. I'm going to play you a recording of that announcement, and then I'll play you the audio of the last few stunning moments of that concert. Bit of a gentle warning here, which may also be a public safety note. If you're driving while listening to this, you may wish to pause this podcast until you're not driving anymore. Or skip ahead about 8.5 minutes and then come back to this timestamp a little later. Here we go.
Tonight is the close of my 18 years here at JU. Tonight's not about me. It's about this fantastic orchestra who may now sit down. It's hard to believe that the hustle and bustle of every Monday and Wednesday night is ending. No more students running in with Chick-fil-A, frantic about upcoming projects and exams, greeting their friends at the end of a long day. But from the chaos, a single note changes everything. A solitary A from the oboes. And suddenly the chaos ends, and the focus moves to the music. I, for one, will very much miss that. This group, despite what has happened, has never faltered. No one asked to drop out or said, why are we even bothering during our last 4 rehearsals. They know why this and all concerts are important. Their physical and spiritual DNA is in this room and in this building. A room for which silence will be the legacy of recent decisions. Not everyone on the stage is a music major, a music minor, or even a JU student. Many are alumni from the Department of Music. Many have gone into music for their profession, and many have not, but they seek the solace from their daily lives here in music and the friendships they've made in orchestra. This experience is not just for the players. Our orchestra concerts have reached many audiences over the years, each person attending for personal reasons. I call to mind when Aaron Brask spoke one year, our horn professor here actually, and also a longtime member of Jacksonville Symphony. I've known him since I was 15, that's a lot of decades. We met at music camp, of course, Interlochen. And he once spoke to the orchestra before a concert, spoke to the audience saying, I as a horn player may not find the cure for cancer, but someone in this audience might. And that person needed this concert tonight. These artists have performed this evening with their heads held high. To give us closure, we will perform the Largo from Dvorak's New World Symphony, something we had planned to perform next year for the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. Some years after this music was composed, the English horn solo that permeates the movement had text set to it, and that text is the song Going Home, a text that speaks of loss and death, but also relationships that cannot be severed. This music has much meaning tonight. I'd like to close with this thought. The alma mater of Jacksonville University closes with the text, "For our memories will always lead us back to our college home." These students are losing their home. In reverence to our collective loss, I would ask you to hold your applause at the end. So no applause, please. And take a minute of silent reflection at the end. Thank you all very much for being here.
Bandwagon will continue in a moment. Okay, let's modulate and get into the trio section. This week in the trio section, as if to make up for the series of recent episodes in which the trio section was a Hammerton editorial or a story time or other similar feature that featured my voice only, this week I'm pleased to be joined by a pair of gentlemen. One of them I have known for a couple of decades, something like that. And the other I have known for about 4 emails. And where from time to time a trio section guest conversation has sprung from the connectional abilities of another of my guests, this would be the first time that both parties have been in the same room at the same time for the same conversation, virtually at least. And although I'm only an honorary member of the organization in which they are movers and shakers, or maybe because I joined that party very late, I expect that I will learn quite a bit about all of that, and I dare say you may as well. It's an organization that I'm frankly appalled that I haven't talked about on this podcast yet, and that little omission gets rectified right now. Please help me welcome to the program Matt Parent and RASSII ELLIOTT. Gentlemen, welcome, and thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks for having us.
I think I've done a decent job of crafting a proper teaser for at least a portion of the conversation today. And one interesting way that I found to get into the main topic has been my opening set of biographical questions. And the two of you can fight over who goes first. Even before those, I should check and see. Matt, where are you coming to us live from?
I am right in downtown Boston, Massachusetts.
And RASSII, you're coming in from?
I'm in the DC metropolitan area. Right now I'm in Maryland. That's what I'm calling home these days.
So to the questions, and I can pose this to anybody and everybody, what is your primary instrument?
My primary instrument, Rob, this is Matt, is alto saxophone and band. I was a percussionist growing up, switched to saxophone at UMass, and then kind of just stuck with the woodwind thing mostly recently.
And my primary instrument is the trombone.
So how did you get into playing those instruments?
High school, middle school, really, just kind of did battery percussion. Then piano lessons moved me over to mallet percussion and kind of stuck that out. And then when I was a drum major in high school, my saxophones were complaining that the part was too hard. So my senior year, I learned it kind of in secret and then just sat down next to them and played their part. I'm like, it can't be that bad. And so ever since then, I just kind of rolled with the alto saxophone. It was good fun.
And for me, I started with trombone in middle school, but I've been involved in music since elementary school. We had these specialty programs that had special themes that focused on the arts, foreign languages, et cetera, in elementary school. So that's where I really got my start in music. And in middle school, I actually really wanted to play the saxophone in 6th grade, but the saxophone class was full. The band director is like, sorry, the class is full. We got some other instruments. I need some more brass players. You look like you'd be great at trombone. Try this mouthpiece. And the rest is kind of history.
As a band director, I was hesitant about looking around and saying, here's what I need. If I had a band full of, a zillion flutes and only one trombone because all the zillion wanted to play flute, I had to respect that. I felt like I had to respect that.
My band director at the time in middle school, he definitely didn't care. He knew what he wanted between his ensembles and he knew what the pipeline was for him to get to what he needed. So I think that's pretty much how he chose. He's like, yeah, no, the saxophone class is full. I need more brass. You're going to play trombone.
So as part of that origin story, what bands have you been active with in your life? Is there a list of them you can fire off?
I've been involved in several, you name it, I probably was in it. So jazz, concert, wind symphony, marching band, pretty broad over the course of my musical career, different playing styles, different types of performances, performed in front of very small crowds to very large crowds. One of the things that I like about music is that it truly opens doors to opportunity. I grew up in Texas, in Houston, Texas. That's where I started. So the music scene and the band scene is really big in Texas, especially once you get to the marching band side. But I can remember going back to I think it was, high school, playing for presidents in high school, the president of Kazakhstan. And we played, this was with President George Bush and he was meeting the president of Kazakhstan in Texas, and they needed a band to play, and we had to learn the national anthem of Kazakhstan. So a random band story of experiences, but like I say, music and band takes you anywhere, and so I have a broad list of experiences through music and band.
For myself, I grew up in Palmer, Massachusetts, which is a relatively small town in Western Mass, not far from the University of Massachusetts, where I did undergrad. And so I did all the typical high school kind of jazz bands and symphony band and all that kind of stuff. And then got to UMass and did the marching band thing. So
the last of these questions that I ask at the beginning of these chats tends to sound like almost a preordained way of getting into the main topic. And it's going to work out that way. In any case, that last question is always, what's your current band-related role?
This is probably slightly different than most people's roles that you deal with on a episode-to-episode basis, but I'm a political scientist by trade, so I have mostly stayed involved through the band service organization, Kappa Kappa Psi, the band service fraternity, where I serve as a governor alongside RASSII here as well.
Still your thunder, man.
Thanks for the intro, Matt. I definitely, I'm one of the district governors along with Matt. One of the other roles and hats that I wear is also as the halftime show announcer for the Howard University Showtime Marching Band. I also assist with some of the band's recruiting, operations, logistics, planning, things like that. So definitely immersed in the college and university band program world. I also work with the alumni band, one of the co-coordinators for that at Howard University. So a lot of the events that incorporate the alumni members of the band program, we work with those folks as well. So a couple of different aspects as it relates to music and band.
And that paragraph by itself has caused me to think of 2 or 3 different either roundtables or other conversations in ensuing podcast episodes that can be generated. But the common element here that got us all in the same room is the Kappa Kappa Psi thing. As I've mentioned, I've gone a year with this podcast and haven't really gotten into the service fraternity, service sorority with Tau Beta Sigma element of it all. And I'll be very honest, I didn't get into the Kappa Kappa Psi thing until a few years after I became an alum. The UMass chapter folks very kindly offered to make me an honorary, and I happily accepted the offer. Prior to that, and even I think since, my understandings of the Kappa Kappa Psi thing have been very secondhand, very much, I don't want to say on the outside looking in, but it looks that way. In the teaser of this episode, I mentioned I was going to talk to a couple of governors. I've talked to a mayor, but it's not the same. Gentlemen, talk a little bit about your function within the Kappa Kappa Psi organization, the national organization.
Yeah, that's an important distinction too, Rob. So, I can give you like a broad overview of the organization and some of the related organizations that work with marching bands, especially at the collegiate level. So both RASSII and I serve as what are known as district governors in Kappa Kappa Psi. And so the basic structure of the organization is that we have a national leadership. That national leadership oversees activities that encompass the entire country, of which we have dozens and dozens of chapters at schools across the country. And then we are broken up into various districts. RASSII and myself are governors of the Northeast District alongside a woman, Marcy Jones. And then each district itself has different governors. And then from within that, you have the individual chapters at schools. So myself was at UMass, RASSII at Howard, and of course, Rob, you're an honorary of UMass as well, and of BU, who still has an active chapter as well. And so that service organization, service fraternity, operates alongside our sister organization, Tau Beta Sigma, which is a band service sorority. There are other music-related organizations that are around, Phi Mu Alpha being one of them, which you've had people on, I know, that are brothers in that. There's also Sigma Alpha Iota, another major music sorority. Notice I'm going to use the term music for Phi Mu Alpha and Sigma Alpha Iota because they encompass choral work as well, whereas Kappa Kappa Psi kind of distinguishes itself as a collegiate band organization specifically. There are a couple others out there that are slightly smaller. There's Mu Phi Epsilon and some other more local ones. I believe Delta Omicron is the name of another one. But that's kind of the broad relationship to these organizations. And what we try to do is work with the band directors at the institutions that were present and we try to provide them with local support via the chapter that's there. And then whenever we can, stronger support from a regional or even national level, where we have some other initiatives that we can talk about, especially related to our national convention and national intercollegiate band.
No, I'll just add, but just to kind of also give a little context to specifically Matt and I are and along with Marcy, as he mentioned, are the district governors in the Northeast district. So that's, essentially all the students at all the colleges from Maine to Virginia, including West Virginia. So about 49 chapters at many of the universities in the Northeast district, and close to almost 900 students. So just to give you like a concept of the depth and breadth of what we're working with specifically in the Northeast district, but we have several thousand students at colleges across the country, several hundred chapters, several thousand students across the country.
I suppose there are two ways to ask this question, and I'm going to put them both out there. First is, how does one become a district governor? And the other version of the question is, how did you become a district governor?
RASSII, you can go ahead and start that.
I was punished. No, just playing. No, it's really from the work that we've done within the fraternity. We are appointed by the national president, so we serve at the pleasure of the president. It's really the connection that we've had with the national organization, the work that we've done within the national organization, as well as the work that we've done with chapters at our respective universities and other chapters. Of course, Matt has served on several national committees. I've served on several national committees. And from that work, we've developed great relationships with students. And so from there, we were appointed by the national presidents at the time. Matt and I both have served a couple of biennium under different national presidents. And so from there, we've continued to serve. We've been reappointed. I think I try to get fired all the time, but hasn't happened. But no, it's a pleasure. We say it's an honor to be selected to serve. And Kappa Kappa Psi is a service and leadership recognition organization. And so this being a district governor is an extension of a lot of the work that we've committed ourselves to. We say Kappa Kappa Psi is a lifelong commitment. It's not just the time that you're serving in the respective band program, but even once you have completed that time as an active member or an active brother, there are other opportunities to continue to serve and to continue to give back. And being district governor is just one of those.
So it's not an election, therefore not a popularity contest.
Yeah. So that's the interesting part. So we do have a series of leadership opportunities that are based in elections. And so we are a student-driven organization, undergraduate active members of the organization. And what we mean by that is students in good standing academically and within their band program, and also within their chapter. Those students have their own leadership of their local chapter. There's leadership at the district level, of which RASSII and myself and Marcy have that cohort of students that report directly to us that have their own leadership initiatives, our district council. And then every 2 years, we meet in July for our national convention. And at our national convention, the students elect their national leadership, which come from the alumni base of the organization, what we call life members. So alumni who have kind of bought into staying active. And so the students are the most powerful force in the organization, which is something that I know we cherish a great deal in the Northeast and throughout the country, that the students are the ones making the decisions for the fraternity and electing their leadership. So the leadership, the president and vice presidents are elected, and then the national president appoints the governors. And our role is appointed for a number of reasons, but predominantly so that we can serve as kind of a go-between for the national leadership and the students in a district, and vice versa, that we can advocate for the students and kind of challenge our national leadership as well, and knowing that we don't have to worry about an election, that we're there to kind of serve as a lens between the active membership and the national leadership. So it's a pretty good structure. It works pretty well, and to center the students as the guiding force of the organization.
Is it fair to analogize your positions as cabinet secretaries?
I think that's kind of fair. I think that's probably a decent thing. Our national president is probably laughing right now because he's picking which cabinet member we're in. So that would be a fun game for our current national president, Bonko, and our incoming national president, Nick Rohrer. I'm sure they'd have a great time for that.
I'd love to figure out like which one would they make us, right? That'd be funny.
Absolutely.
Have I gone too far?
We haven't gone far enough yet. No,
we haven't gone far enough. So that's kind of the basic structure and how we get to where we are. And then within our roles, we serve as a professional face alongside our vice president of professional relations, which is typically a band director. Currently, Dr. William Lake Jr. from George Mason serves in that role. We kind of work alongside them and do our best to present a professional face to band directors around the country as well. So we try to also serve in that capacity to mentor students and work alongside them with their band directors.
I dutifully went to the Kappa Kappa Psi website and had a look for some kind of job description for district governors. And I saw one and I read it and I thought, this is not a reflection on how it was expressed, but I would love a translation of what a district governor does. My prediction was that there were both ceremonial and I suppose you could say happy roles to play, and then also the practical work. And I knew a little bit about the interfacing with the various chapters and all that. But if you could talk a little bit about what you do, what kind of workload it is. It's obviously not your full-time gig.
Yeah, sometimes it can be full-time, depending on the time of year, what's happening in the collegiate band world. But primarily mentoring the students within Kappa Kappa Psi, the Northeast District. Sometimes the work that we do overlaps district, depending on what the need calls for, especially if we're supporting one of our national committees. But mentoring, supporting students at our various colleges, working collaboratively with our sister organization, Tau Beta Sigma, and really being that example for students when it comes to national leadership, being that interface, overseeing a lot of the day-to-day operations of our district, project planning, doing those routine check-ins. We work directly with the district officers that are elected in the districts. So every spring we have what is called our district convention. And in that district convention, we provide workshops where students can learn and grow leadership, brotherhood, service. We try to infuse our district conventions with those pillars. And then from there, those students will elect their district officers for the ensuing year. So we work hand in hand with those individuals to help kind of be the chief administrators, if you will, of the district. We have a fraternity constitution, policies, bylaws, and so we help to support the national leadership in enforcing those where there may be a chapter that doesn't abide by those. Sometimes we have to weigh in on that and provide support for those students in those colleges that may not be abiding by those fraternity policies. So there is that enforcement arm when those students are not compliant with our policies, but maintain the core values of the organization, support engagement overall for the national policies, the national programs, our national membership education program. So we're really working with students day to day on a lot of those programs that we have in the national organization and making sure that they're meeting the goals and objectives of their chapter. The national organization, as well as the district, requires a lot of communication, a lot of listening, a lot of engagement with the students, because college students need a lot of guidance and wisdom. And so we're there to be a listening ear. We do a lot of conflict resolution because you can imagine these are college students. One of the things that we're recognizing now within the organization is that we have a good group of students who were all a part of the COVID pandemic. So there were a lot of the interpersonal challenges that were a result of the pandemic that we've had to deal with over the course of the last year or so. So just working through those things, but it can be a full-time job. And the biggest part is planning for our district convention here recently. That's one of the things that really takes up a lot of time at times because there are a lot of different pieces and a lot of coordination within the national organization as well as the district to get students to appear for that.
When I was starting this podcast project, I was very sure that I was going to do the majority of it being accentuating the positive and all. And we know that life is not all positives. And I didn't want to overemphasize this, but I wondered if there had been moments in your time as governor that were challenging. whether it was conflict resolution or whether it was enforcement of policies, or because chapters occasionally misbehave in various ways. So at the very least, you've established a relationship with chapters such that you're not just the national organization swooping in, having never met anybody kind of thing. Talk a little bit about what that part of the experience is like.
Yeah, overcoming challenges is a super important thing that we deal with all the time. And so one of our hopes, right, to take a step back kind of not to spin this in a positive light, but as a real kind of explanation of what we've done in recent years and what we continue to do and why it's important, is that, part of our goal is that we bring in great band members and make them better. That's one of the goals of the organization, is to provide a place to really develop leaders in the chapter, which we then hope makes a better band. That's kind of the goal, that we can serve the band director there and the band members there, both to make the band a more well-functioning organization and make a band director's life easier, but also that we're providing a really nice, pleasant experience for the other band members. And, you build a community and then you welcome people into that community. And so a lot of the hard work that we do is often when those things aren't happening. Either service isn't being done or isn't the emphasis of the organization, which happens like any group of, students sometimes are led astray. And then oftentimes there may be some misunderstandings between the role of the organization, between college band members and the leadership at the university, whether it's band directors or fraternity life or sometimes student affairs. And so while we don't have a role on these campuses and we don't impose ourselves there, we try to, when we can, mediate between things. And the reality is the band world is not massive, as we all know. And so we often have personal connections cutting across most of these things. And we do take advantage of those whenever we can, because at the end of the day, it is just band. And so as long as, people are safe, people are relatively successful in school, and the band program is operating, we try to not catastrophize as well. And that can be an important thing, that when we deal with these challenges, is that oftentimes it's just band, right? It's dealing with issues that don't need to escalate, but becomes such a heightened emotional experience for everyone. And it's so important to everyone that sometimes we have to offer that perspective as people who are, 10, 15, 20 years out, to say, trust me, it is important. It's important to you now, but you don't need to let it, ruin your life, ruin band members' lives. So just offering perspective to keep things going. Now, there are serious issues sometimes, and like any college organization, we're there to deal with that and make sure that our organization upholds both legal and moral obligations. And so that is something that we've had to do in the past. Fortunately, nothing severe in my time. I don't know if RASSII, before I came on, he was a governor slightly before me in the Northeast, but nothing really severe. But, we've dealt with your typical behavioral collegiate issues, and, we make it through the other side. But that's the benefit of being an organization over 100 years old with a fully functioning national leadership and years of just experience to draw from.
I would agree, and I would just add that we, in my time as governor or in this role, we really haven't had anything detrimental, knock on wood, thankfully, that we've had to really deal with. We haven't had any major challenges. I think the biggest one is just the interpersonal. Like I mentioned before, it's the students that can't press the mute button because now they're actually in the room, whereas they spend a lot of time on Zoom, in chapter meetings on Zoom, and having that, connection virtually. And then the pandemic, the universities are bringing folks back. Band is happening again on college campuses. So now you actually have to work with someone in person, face to face. I think that was one of the biggest challenges that we've really had to deal with. We haven't had any major, policy violations and things like that, thankfully. But, there are challenges when you think about what happens on a college campus that we've had to deal with. But we've navigated a lot of those successfully. We have the right people in place in our national leadership team that handles a lot of those. We have a lot of different mechanisms for working with students. We partner with colleges when those issues arise to work with the colleges. We try not to get in the way of the collegiate experience. And we actually encourage the students to work with their student activities office, to work with their Greek life offices when some of those challenges arise. Yes, we can come in. Yes, we can support. Yes, we are part of that first line of, support. But we also encourage them to utilize their resources on campus as well.
And COVID aside, Band is probably pretty high on the list of activities that are emotional anyway. I mean, theater might be one of the few that's higher than band, just in terms of what it is we're doing and how we're doing it and the level of passion that's brought to it when people are really enthused about it. So,
yeah, well, and to add some kind of character to, the experience that we deal with, it's not that it's necessarily negative. It goes towards some of the challenges and some of the positives. The college environment is a feudal environment. And what I mean by that is people have a lot of competing priorities and competing leadership structures. And band is like its own little world, right? You've got the trumpets and the trombones and the woodwinds and the percussion and the drum majors and the band directors. And, you're in marching band and pep band and symphony band. And some people are music majors and some people aren't music majors. So we try to create an environment where, if you're in a large band, like at UMass where Rob and I went, it's not unusual for the clarinets to get together or the saxophones to get together or the trumpets to get together, that famous hog line. So we cross-cut all of those things. And so we try to provide kind of a means of meeting in the middle and getting the best of all of it. And that includes at a college campus, right? I think that's one of the great things we do is that we are on some campuses where there are no music majors. We are in some where it's predominantly music majors in the organization. And so when then we come together at the regional and national level, it's great to see the different ways that we can all serve this great thing that we love. I mean, I'm not a particularly good musician myself, but I love the endeavor. And so as a means of helping create strong leaders, which then go help their band program, that's one of the things that we try to do is kind of develop skills that can echo out and make for a better collegiate band experience.
Dear listener, that's a place in our conversation where we could have wrapped up and collectively made a wonderful point about our favorite topic, yours and mine, but we had only just gotten going. And here's a little window into the production process of BandWagon. Usually I'll record for, on average, between an hour and an hour and a half, and then via judicious pruning, as well as an eye toward the bits of conversation that were sort of tangents that may not have served the main point of the session, I'll be able to edit the thing down to a solid 35 or 40 minutes. This was one of those times when, even as we were recording, I was thinking to myself, there's too much great stuff here. I can't really cut anything, can I? Which is a good problem to have. And this past week, I experienced that problem. Oh well. So, next week in the trio segment, the exciting conclusion of my conversation with Matt Parent and RASSII ELLIOTT, with more about their Kappa Kappa Psi work and other things too. You can have a rollicking conversation. I'm not exactly sure whether Webster's dictionary would consider a verb like to rollick, but as you perhaps have noticed in the last 25 minutes, if a conversation can rollick, this one sure did. Come on back for another couple of little segments after this short break. Thanks so much for listening. Here comes the dogfight. This week's dogfight is a nod to the fact that yesterday was May the 4th. Surely you don't think I'd forgotten that invented holiday, the day in which all the Star Wars fans in the world celebrate themselves. Yeah, I'm a Star Trek guy, but honestly, straight from my time as an 8-year-old, anything that involved zap guns and outer space backgrounds, that got my attention. I've learned to be a dignified consumer and appreciator of mature, thoughtful science fiction literature, but at the same time, I'm still waiting for the opportunity to own a pretend Tribble of my very own. Not a real one. I don't want 1,771,561 of them 3 days later. Yeah. Anywho, yes, I suppose the Star Wars universe counts as a guilty pleasure of mine. And so does band. But as this podcast is devoted to helping people cast aside the guilty part, I shall tell the story of the day in 1999 when two guilty pleasure Venn diagram circles of mine intersected. As we do know this, when the marching music activity is done right, it can be great. And when it's done poorly, it can be cringe-worthy, and we're in look-away territory. Until that day in 1999, and since then, when marching ensembles have attempted to reproduce the John Williams Star Wars musical scores, I've found it anywhere from almost good try to, oh, put that away, it's not even close and it's embarrassing. In fact, in summer of 1999, no less an ensemble than the Blue Devils played an arrangement of Anakin Skywalker's theme from The Phantom Menace as a parking lot warm-up chorale. That was the very quiet and pretty and sad theme that sort of reverse-engineered the Darth Vader theme to describe Vader as a little boy. And please forgive me, but I'm going to say this. The arrangement wasn't quite right. I know, heresy. Sorry. But here's the thing. Here's why I dare to say such a thing. I am working from the perspective of someone who considers himself, rightly or not, something of a Star Wars score savant. When I hear any orchestral cue from the original trilogy of films, I can hear the dialogue from that scene in my head at the same time. I can hum along with most of those cues accurately. You could say I've marinated in the stuff for about 48 years. And having invested that kind of ridiculous time in listening to those recordings, I've gotten used to what the London Symphony Orchestra sounded like when they were making those recordings. When The Force Awakens opened in late 2015, as glad as I was to hear the first new Star Wars film score in 10+ years, still I was a little puzzled at the opening blast of brass because it didn't sound quite the same. I wondered if it was, ironically, the new recording technology that was making the brass sound a little different, not quite the same. And then I read somewhere that the score was recorded in Los Angeles, which was a nod to not forcing the then octogenarian John Williams to cross the ocean to London repeatedly. Aha, so different. Not bad, just not quite. So, at the 4th Annual Collegiate Marching Band Festival, held at J. Bernie Crum Stadium in Allentown, Pennsylvania, came a moment of will it or won't it? I sat up in the stands amongst the Boston University band folks with whom I had traveled, along with the legions of other college band members and local high school band kids and lots of other spectators that were there also. We were watching the mighty Penn State Blue Band take the field. I had never heard Penn State live. Their reputation preceded them. The festival, which to that point had taken place on the last weekend of September, had been moved that year to the first weekend in October to accommodate Penn State's schedule so they could perform. Yeah, you do that for certain groups which reside in the pantheon of American marching bands. Their PA announcement declared that they would open their exhibition show with the theme from Star Wars. And my heart sank. Penn State took a deep breath, and so did I. At the time, I didn't trust a Big Ten-style, high-stepping, spats-wearing band to make Star Wars sound like anything other than a marching band trying to approximate that sound I was so familiar with and knew could not be reproduced, so I prepared to be disappointed. Penn State saved me the trouble. In the time before and in the time since, I have not ever heard a marching band just completely nail the opening introductory few measures of John Williams' Intro to a Galaxy Far, Far Away, but that afternoon, Penn State nailed it. I sat up very much straighter on those not quite comfortable benches in the J. Bernie Crum homestands. I listened very much more closely to the chords, the rhythms, the voicings in the arrangement, trying to see if I could spot watered-down rhythms, not quite correct chords. I couldn't. To my ears, with no orchestral string section present, outdoors with no acoustical shells to direct the sound properly to my precise location in the audience, Penn State delivered a sound so authentic, so true to the original, that I wished I could hit rewind and listen to it again, right then. You know that phrase, I couldn't believe my ears? It's thrown around with such abandon now. But I couldn't. But I was forced to, because those were live humans down there. No lip sync or the band equivalent, whatever technology that might require. No faking it in any way. What you hear is what you get. And I got an earful. Penn State put an arrangement very much like that one back into its repertoire 10 years later, and they almost reproduced that Allentown sound. But I think it'll never happen again. And that's okay. The wind was blowing just right. The winds were blowing just right. And at least one particular geek in the stands at Allentown got his perfect storm, his great convergence of guilty pleasures. Okay, after this brief message, we'll wrap things up for this week. Thanks for continuing to listen. To wrap up this week, let's take the CODA. For the CODA this week, a brief follow-up to my trio section conversation with Matt and RASSII. They wanted to make sure that people are aware that Kappa Kappa Psi and Tau Beta Sigma, as the college band, service, fraternity, and sorority that they are gender inclusive, open to all gender identities. I have to say, all you need to do is hang out near any college band with an active KK Psi chapter, and you know this. Actually, there were several women who were KK Psi brothers and a couple of gentlemen who were Tau Beta Sigma sisters at UMass when I marched in the 1980s, so this is not new, but worth pointing out nonetheless. This and lots more information about the KK Psi organization and about the fine gentleman that represented KK Psi a few minutes ago, and about contributing to the organization, financially or otherwise, can be found in this week's show notes. Also, a future program note. This will not be the last time you hear Mr. Elliott over these here bandwagon airwaves, if I have anything to say about it. Oh, wait, I do. That's Bandwagon for this week. Thanks, as always, for downloading and listening. Bandwagon was written, researched, and produced by your humble host. Musical interludes were produced by Hammerton Media, from source material largely by John Philip Sousa. You can listen to more episodes at the pod's website, heyband.podbean.com. Please give me feedback. Let me know what you like or what you think might change. You can do that using the email address heybandwagon@yahoo.com. Or leave a 90-second voice message by going to speakpipe.com/heybandwagon. Be aware that I do reserve the right to include your message on the podcast unless you say otherwise. Those contact links and links to this week's news items, conversation topics, and my interview guests Matt Parent and RASSII ELLIOTT can be found in our show notes, as can a link to Bandwagon's merch store thanks to the good folks at TeePublic. Please share the show on social media, and thank you for that. If you enjoy this podcast, please do share it in the direction of someone whom you think might not be a listener yet. Word of mouth really is the best recruiting tool. And to keep up with the pod every week, subscribe to Bandwagon on the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are sold. For now, take care, stay in touch, stay in tune, and we'll do this all again next week. I'm Rob Hammerton. Strive for the highest.